Hi, Read 585. Welcome to Week 6, Part 1. I am starting by reviewing some answers to your most pressing questions from the discussion forum back from Week 4, where we talked about the AYP info guide and the articles related to school effectiveness, the Fisher-Frey article, as well as the Lipson article. So let's take a look at your burning questions. First question from Stephanie. I wonder what the new AYP will look like with Common Core. With all the negative things that are being said about the Smarter Balance test, I wonder if they will put all schools in program improvement. I also hear that attendance will play a role in the new AYP, which puts schools in poorer areas at a greater disadvantage. Stephanie, you definitely weren't alone in wondering what the new AYP will look like. And my answer to you is that in California, currently, they are working on Senate Bill 1458, which changes the measure of API and with that AYP for the 2014-15 school year. 60% of API will be based on state test scores and 40% will be based on other measures. I didn't see attendance named specifically in those measures, but it's still being determined. I will put the California Department of Ed PowerPoint in our resources section, which is where I'm pulling a lot of this information about Senate Bill 1458 from. All right, more questions. Kathy, my questions are similar to what Stephanie wondered. How will Smarter Balance test scores fit into the existing accountability program? Is it possible and more likely probable that schools will not meet the current AYP requirements for the first few years and thus be on target to be considered in program improvement? So again, they are still working on that Senate bill, which will answer this. So no concrete answer at this time. However, for the next few years, we are in limbo and scores from the pilots will not be used for accountability. So we'll talk about that more in a second. Kayla, I came to the same questions that Stephanie and Catherine did. What does the Smarter Balanced Assessment test scores mean for achieving proficiency, and what is defined as proficiency under the Common Core state standards? What does proficiency look like for the different subgroups, or are they all included with the general population? So with this being the pilot year, they haven't determined it yet, but they're currently working on it. Stay tuned. It is highly likely that they will still have subgroups. All right, so Kim, what will happen this year with no AYP score since most schools will not have a testing program to use? We use STAR and this year no one is being tested like the past years. Wonder what will happen. And a similar question from Aaron. I know our district is no longer going to do CST testing this year. Is it the same for all schools across the state? And the answer to that is yes. And then we also have Assembly Bill 484, which prohibits the use of field test scores for accountability purposes. So we won't be using any of those pilot tests for accountability. Assembly Bill 484 also provides alternatives for schools and districts that do not receive an API to meet legislative requirements in one of the following ways. You can use your most recent API. You can use an average of the 3 most recent annual API calculations, or you can use an alternative measure that shows increases in pupil academic achievement school-wide for all student groups. So I'll talk about, so that's for API. For AYP, for elementary and middle schools, there is flexibility for the 2014 year. Schools currently in program improvement will maintain their current status, but will not be required to implement any new program improvement activities. There will be no schools added to program improvement this year. So essentially, we're just all going to stay where we're at in California. That is, your API and AYP from years past will carry over. You will use your 2013 results, which could be good or bad for you. So some more answers from the Assembly Bill 484. It was signed by the governor on October 2nd, 2013. The intent of the legislature is to provide a system of assessment with the primary purpose of assisting teachers, administrators, pupils, and their parents, improving teaching and learning, and promoting high-quality teaching and learning using a variety of assessment approaches and item types. So the main components of this legislation that impacts accountability is it's replacing the STAR program with the California Measurement of Academic Performance and Progress. So California Assembly Bill 484 is changing our state accountability for student academic performance. So a little bit more about this bill. It prohibits the use of the 2013-14 field test results for accountability purposes. It prohibits the comparison of results from the Smarter Balanced assessments with California standards tests. So there should be no comparison between the two. So, if this was counted as proficient on the STAR, that has no bearing over what is proficient on the Smarter Balance test, and you shouldn't be comparing results across the different tests. Provides the state superintendent with the approval of the State Board of Education the authority to determine if API scores would be a valid measure of school and district performance in the 13-14 and 14-15 school years only. So again, there is that flexibility for those years. The state superintendent will take a recommendation to the State Board of Education regarding whether or not to suspend elementary and middle school API reports in spring 2014. So, like I said, they haven't decided this quite yet. It will be decided in spring whether or not they have enough information for API reports. All right, more impact on AYP. So this is for elementary and middle schools. Determination flexibility allows the 2014 school year AYP to reflect 2013 results. So like I said, if you're in program improvement, you'll still be there. No new schools will be added based on the field tests. Also for elementary and middle schools, the state superintendent will take a recommendation to the State Board of Education regarding whether or not to suspend elementary and middle school API reports. So just told you about that. Now, let's talk about high schools because it's a little bit different. So since the California high school exit examination is still going to be administered this year, the California Department of Education could produce API reports for high schools, and the API would be based on the high school exit examination as well as the CAPA. They can also use a variety of other assessments. So high school might still be having an API calculated for them, but elementary and middle school not so much. So AYP 2014 AYP determinations will be made for high schools based on the exit examination and the CAPA for ELA and mathematics. High schools may be identified or advanced in program improvement based on 2014 AYP results. So hopefully that answered your burning questions regarding accountability for the current school year, which we do have information about, but future school years we don't. I do not have all of the answers. Should you have more questions regarding these bills, you can definitely email the Academic Accountability Unit. There's their phone number if you want to call them, and there is their email. But they are the ones currently working through all of this fun of accountability with the change to the Common Core and Smarter Balanced. Another resource for you, you can sign up for Common Core state standard updates from the California Department of Education. To do that, you would simply subscribe by sending a blank message to that email address. And if you hold on a second, I'll show you what their updates. So again, if you want late breaking news regarding the Common Core state standards, you can sign up for these updates that will get emailed to you monthly. So here is a sample of one. Some good information here. Here's information about field test flashes. There's even videos of 2 new videos providing information to high school and middle school students about the Smarter Balance field test. There's training modules here. More information. Here's a webinar for those of you concerned about parent engagement and Common Core state standards in mathematics. So again, if you want to sign up for these updates, there is the information. You can always unsubscribe as well. All right, let's switch gears a little bit, talking about charters. Valerie had this question: how can charter schools be their own local education agency? Are they subject to meeting the AYP requirements? Yes. Answer: all schools, even charters, must receive an AYP report. So with charter schools that are locally funded, so there are 2 types of charter schools. There are those that are locally funded through a local educational agency. So, they might be funded by a district. And then there are charters that are their own local education agencies, and they receive direct funding from the state. So actually, the charter I used to work for was a statewide benefit charter, so they were their own LEA. Whereas other charters might be funded through a district, and then they're kind of subject a little bit more to that district. But they are held accountable to AYP, and then if they receive Title I funding, the program improvement accountability provisions also apply. And then, so basically they can be their own LEA, and yes, they're still held accountable to AYP. More questions. Elizabeth asks, as a resource specialist, I have goals and objectives on all my students. I track their data. Great practice. I know when my students are making or not making progress and adjust accordingly. The difficulty is that within her setting, we have a high percentage of special education students that impact our AYP scores. How is the state taking that into account? Kathy actually responded to you. Thanks, Kathy. She says, I do feel that accountability is very important, but that it is difficult to get a process that is completely right. The things that I found that were interesting to me were the alternate forms for testing students with mental or learning disabilities can take. It was interesting reading about the CAPA test on page 10 as an alternative to the STAR test that is based on a student's IEP, and also to learn that less than 1% of California students take this alternative. There's also the CMA, the alternative test for content areas, page 9. So that's how the states take it into account, by providing an alternate assessment. And I know there are also accommodations and modifications coming through with the change to Smarter Balanced. All right, new topic. Let's talk about PD. As you saw from the readings, PD is very important for building teacher expertise so that you are having a high functioning, effective school. So a couple questions on PD. Trisha, I agree with what Christina pointed out, that teachers are not receiving enough professional development. As a substitute teacher, I am often working for a teacher who is out for Common Core training. I have noticed a lot of training in this area. However, I do not see the teachers out for any other professional development. Yes, with the shift to Common Core, there is more training happening in the area of Common Core right now. Hopefully, there is still professional development happening in other areas, but your professional development for schools needs to be tied to your school improvement plan. So my guess is your school improvement plan has to do with implementing the Common Core state standards, and that's why so much of the PD is happening for that. Trisha also asks, is professional development required after you have secured a job? And this really depends on the state that you are working in. It would be really nice if states were consistent in this, because having taught in Vegas, California, and now Michigan, I'm having to keep track of all of these different procedures for certification, renewal, and all that good stuff. Well, in California, you have to go through a beginning teacher program called BITSA that helps you get your credential cleared. So you need to participate in that, however it looks for you in your school setting. So that's usually a 2 to 3 year program and involves a comprehensive portfolio. In other states, they do continuing education clock hours, where you need to receive so many continuing education hours within a certain time frame. So if your credential is valid for 3 or 5 years, within that time period, you need to accrue so many of these hours in order to renew your credential. So yes, professional development should be required after you have a job, mainly for certification purposes. Valerie, how do we make decisions about professional development and instruction when each school differs with diverse student populations and socioeconomic factors? How do we support teachers to operate autonomously but within a community of professionals who are committed to the same goal? Great question, Valerie, and that goes back to your school improvement plan. Your school improvement plan should be based on your school-wide data, so looking at your diverse student population and your socioeconomics, and from there, developing goals and making decisions that are going to help with your specific population, and then messaging that goal, investing your staff in that goal so that everyone is committed to it. Easier said than done, though. Erin, how can I step up into a leadership role at my school in regards to our literacy program without stepping on others' toes? And Erin, that is a great question. Hopefully, participating in this program will give you a good point of entry if you were to approach, say, your principal or your literacy specialist, or someone in a leadership role, to say, I'm taking this class on professional development for the literacy specialist. I'm learning all of these great things. I would really like to help implement. Is there maybe a committee I could start? Is there something I could help with? I know as an administrator, I always love when people are trying to connect their coursework to what can improve our building. So I see, hopefully, staff at your school being receptive to you approaching them for ways you can help and improve and use your new learning. Let us know how it goes. Erin again, is it even possible to unite our staff under a school-wide literacy program, or is everyone just pulled too thin this year? And I can't answer that for you and your staff, but I know there is a lot of tension and stress right now with the switch over, but it is very important that your school unites under a specific program or goal that is essentially fueling the work that you are doing. Think about the Fisher and Frey article. More questions about PD. Elvira, would it be better to work on a professional development in reading writing strategies for the content areas during the summer as compared to during the year? Yes, I think the sooner the better you can roll it out, especially over summer when people have more time to process and to plan and to apply that information without being mired down by the conferences, the report cards, the assessment grading, all of that good stuff. So right now we are actually starting to implement strategies in PD that we want to implement next school year. So we are providing teachers with samples of them. We are doing basic overviews. We are giving them an independent study plan to help them so that they have all of the information they need to successfully implement it once next school year starts. So it definitely requires some advanced planning and coming up with some sort of action plan that starts as soon as possible. So what are steps you're going to take this month, next month, all the way through when you're hoping to implement it? But I would say definitely the sooner the better. The spring before, but if you have teacher turnover, that's hard to bring people on board with. But definitely summer is a great time, but sometimes summer can be too late when teachers have already made plans and things for the school year. Second question, is the literacy leadership team the only way of having the secondary general education teachers buy into the idea of literacy? So there are many different ways to get people to buy in. This one is preferable because the message is coming from peers at the school. It's not coming from a higher up power mandating you do this. So it's nice when the message comes from within. You can also appeal to them using data and statistics. It's hard to complain or argue against data and research that shows effectiveness for these different things. So yeah, my recommendation would be to get them to come up with the idea on their own, or to really give them a strong rationale using data. All right, how do we improve? I picked just a couple. You all really did a great job of analyzing and reading these articles to come up with practices to emulate, but I picked just a couple. Valerie says our schools and educational leaders have at their disposal many school-wide plans, but is noted the problem is not in the development of the plan, but rather in the implementation of the plan. Good thing to keep in mind. It's kind of laborious to come up with a plan, but it's very hard to implement the plan with all of the people and the mindsets and the moving parts. Kayla, I feel that the literacy coach interviewed in this article stated what I would like to emulate best. Our students didn't just forget how to summarize, we just didn't notice before. The Cornell notes have forced us to notice a need our students have. I would like to continue to try to notice what skills my students are lacking through the trial of different instructional strategies. Yeah, and that's the first step really, is to notice where you need to improve, notice what your students are missing. More strategies to emulate, coming from Christina Garuba. I love that the results of the Lipson et al. Study indicated that no single program or approach to teaching reading was common in each of the successful schools that they studied. Teachers, not all have to be robots who have the same personalities or pedagogical strategies. Rather, they just need to be working towards a common goal. Furthermore, each of these successful schools used a different program. I find myself struggling to determine what the best materials and resources are, and I've realized that what matters is the fidelity and rigor with which a specific strategy is implemented. I also liked how the successful schools had their students reading books for an average of 20 minutes a day outside of their reading groups, and that block scheduling was used to produce uninterrupted instructional time. This strategy aligns with the Common Core because of long interrupted block of time. We were just notified at my school that our schedule will be changed next year so that you will have this. So lots of great strategies there highlighted by Christina. Thank you for that. You're right, it is not the program, but it is the teaching behind the program. All right, a few more strategies. Vince did an amazing job. If you haven't had a chance to read his post, you really should. It is a good model to you on what a post should look like. But he took all of the information from the readings and then synthesized it very nicely and provided a strong rationale for what he said. But he synthesized all of the information, I just said that, but into the following steps for practices to emulate. First, having a clear and collegial process for staff development. So having that clear focus, not like the teacher in the article you read for week 5 who has all of these different PDs focused on many different things. You need the clear focus, and then you need the collegial process. We're collaborating, we're a community of learners, and we are really thinking about our one united goal we are collaborating on. Next, across discipline efforts to improve literacy habits. So whatever you're implementing needs to just transcend one classroom. It needs to be happening school-wide. Next, the use of specific and limited strategies. So we're not doing a whole gauntlet of things, not a laundry list, but we're being very specific and intentional. And then lastly, the use of data to reflect and revise the plan. Very essential to when you're making your goals, think of how are we going to measure these goals and when are we going to measure these goals? Can we do a midpoint check and then hold yourself accountable to doing that and then seeing was this effective or not and what can we do now? Thinking about those questions that Christina Vicente reminds us, what's working better this month? Who do we need to recognize for their contributions? What are you seeing that needs to be addressed to ensure that the plan is implemented? Christina had a great idea about taking these questions and making a mini monthly report or even weekly to provide to her principal to address these questions because they shed so much light on what's going on in terms of her role. It would be difficult to present this information at the weekly meeting because those meetings typically address the immediate fires, but these questions are very reflective. She also loved the idea of paid teacher observations. So hopefully from the week 4 discussion, And from the articles, you took away some strategies for improving your current school or your future school, to improve teacher expertise, to give continuity to instruction, all of those things that the articles highlighted as important. All right, I'm going to wrap this up and I'll see you back for part 2 where I go over upcoming assignments.